Okay, good morning. We are going to look at what is now called graduation tracking, formerly known as graduation points. We no longer use the term points, so Frontline has updated their guide that everything is now considered graduation tracking. So it is the same concept, it is just termed different based on um, how we look at things. So this is the graduation tracking guide in student information. It is from the Learning Center. So if you go to the Learning Center and type in graduation tracking, you can get to the full PDF from here. If not, if you like the pieces parts, you can get to all the individual parts just by um, clicking on the tracking guide overview. So this takes us into each of the parts that we're going to look at today individually. But if you want to print the entire guide, that the PDF is available for you. Okay. A couple other things that we are going to look at today. We are going to, because it kind of coincides with our graduation tracking inside of student information in our procedural checklists, there is a checklist for graduation eligibility. We are going to talk about tasks 1, 2, and 3. Intermittent in between our graduation tracking module. So if you want to have that open, again, we will look at only 1, 2, and 3. The rest of the information will be provided in another training, which has not yet been scheduled. But I will get to that at some point in time. So again, our main document is our graduation tracking guide, and then we are also going to look at the graduation eligibility procedural checklist. So in student information, we are going to start looking at our graduation tracking. So everything has been updated from grad points to grad tracking in student information as well as in data map. We will also look briefly at data map so you can see your graduation plans from there. So when we're looking at graduation tracking, of course, we have to go by what ODE or ODO, graduation requirements are. And we know over the course of the last several years, graduation requirements have changed and progressed and so forth. So currently, we are on the 2023 and beyond graduation requirements. So if you search ODO's website for graduation requirements, you can find 23 and beyond. So there are three components to that that we are going to look at. Right here is the graduation requirement overview. So this is a great handout for parents, things like that, because it displays what is required. Okay, it does have all the nitty gritty on the back showing what the score is to meet competency, what your remediation free scores are for ACT, SAT, and so forth, and all of the seals that are required or could be that are available for requirement. So there are three components for graduation. So of course we have our course completion. Minimum required is 20 credits. However, each individual district has the option to go above that for their district requirements. So that is one option. And then the second is your demonstrating competency. So demonstrating competency has a variety of areas, but your main area is to show competency in um, algebra 1 and ELA or English Language Arts 2. Um, to show competency, they need to score at least a 684 on the end of course exams or higher. So we do know that 700 is proficient, but 684 is showing competency. Then there are additional options if a student does not pass the end of course exams, and we will get through all of those. So that includes College Credit Plus classes, ACT, military enlistment, and so forth. And then the last part of our graduation requirements are our readiness seals. And this is a good spot. The document itself actually references this page. And right now, for some reason, ODU's website is non-secure. So if you get to that site, you can just say continue and you can continue with the non-secure site. But our graduation seals are all listed here. And if you hover over them, it will tell you what the seal is. And then if you click on them, it will tell you what the requirements are to accomplish that seal. Um, Frontline used to put this in their documentation, but it kept changing. So they just provide a link to ODU's website to each of the seals. So it's always up to date. Okay, so we now know what is required for graduation for 23 and beyond. Now we are going to start looking at things. So before we even start our graduation tracking, there are some things that need to be in place in order for our graduation tracking to actually um, uh, to gather this information. If things aren't set up in our courses or our course history, your graduation tracking screen will not update. So the first thing that I am going to do is look at one of my courses. So if I look at a course, I'm going to look at my Algebra 1, for example. So there are a couple main areas that you want to look at. So I'm going to click on my edit pencil. The first thing that you want to do is to make sure that it is checked is high school credits, whether it is a seventh or eighth grade class for Algebra 1, or it is actually a high school 9 through 12 class for Algebra 1. We want to make sure that it is checked for is high school credit. This is what will populate in the graduation tracking screen. Okay. So that is one area. The next area is on our EMIS tab. The other thing is the core subject area. So this is important. This is how it calculates what courses have been met to meet our 20 credit hour requirements. So we know English language arts, we have to have 4 credits. Math, we also have to have 4. 3 in science and social studies are half a credit in health and PE, and then 5 electives, which includes 1 hour of fine arts and a half a credit of financial literacy since 2023. So in order for those to be counted off in our graduation tracking, we have to make sure that we are picking the correct core subject area. As long as that is selected correctly, then it will accumulate those numbers on the screen. The other thing that you can check, and this goes with the graduation verification and eligibility, which will again be a different training, but this is graduation eligibility. If that is checked, that can be used in the graduation verification rules. So again, on the general tab is high school credit. On the EMIS, making sure that the core subject area is selected properly, and then the miscellaneous tab if you are going to use those graduation verification rules. Then if we go to our student course history, so I'm going to look at Tommy Two-Tone, and I'm going to go to his course history. So if you're looking at any of the course history, anything that has been manually entered, a couple things again that you want to pay attention to when you are entering the information. One, the core subject area is a required area, so you do want to make sure that that is the correct. Notice it also says it's only required when is high school credit is checked, so that is something else that you want to double check when you are manually entering any courses into the course history, that is high school credit is checked. Okay. And then again, if you are going to use the graduation verification rules, you would want to make sure that the graduation eligibility is checked. If you're like, well, I'm not going to go through every single course, the CRSE report is your course curriculum. It is going to show all of your courses. The nice thing about this report is it does allow you to customize the fields to display. So if you want to check to make sure all of your courses are included in your high school credit, you can provide that on the right-hand side, and then when you run the report, it will populate the is high school credit. The course details report from the Analytic Hub is also another one. It contains every single field that you see here in this. The CRSE will allow you to pick one or two or all the way up to 10. So it allows you to customize it a little bit more. The Analytic Hub course detail is more in depth. It provides everything for you. Okay, so moving on. So we are going to start looking at our students in our graduation tracking. So if I go to SIS, I go to student, and then I have graduation tracking. In my tracking menu, they kind of did rearrange these with the change from points to summary. So now your summary search is down at the bottom versus it was at the top before. This is where you can search for any kid. You do not have to have a student in context. You can still do a search of all your students. And then your graduation summary is for an individual student as well as your student exemptions. So we're going to start off, we're on page 2 with our grad summary search. So we're going to look at that. It is going to provide all the students that you have access to. So if you have access at the high school level, you're going to see all those high school level kids. Okay. So the first thing up at the top is your filter criteria. So you can break this down. It's right now, it is going to show all the different grade levels. So you can see, and I'm only displaying 10 records at a time. So for some of you that have larger graduating classes, you might want to have more than 10 records at a time. So you can change this down here at the bottom. You can also sort this out. So maybe you want to start looking at your 12th graders. You can just search for your 12th graders and it's just going to populate those students. Okay. Anytime you want to clear any of your filter criteria, you can just clear and it brings back all of this. It'll bring back all the students once I click on search. For the districts that have multiple counselors, so if you just want to see your students, you can select that correct counselor. Okay, so you can select yourself just to see the students that you are working with. Okay. If you have ad hoc groups, so if you are working, maybe your JVS kids, maybe, you have a certain group of kids, maybe CCP kids that are out. Maybe they're not attending in district. All their CCP classes are out of district. You can use those ad hoc groups. And then you can also look at student memberships. So any of the student memberships that are applied to your students, those will populate as well. And remember, this is a demo database, so all of my information is fake. Some of these students have been in high school for, 10 years, so ignore that information. I did try to stage some students, so it is more current information. So looking at our information down here, we have 4 different columns. So the student, this is going to provide any information for that individual student. So I'm going to click here on Corey. It'll take me into his graduation summary where I can see all of this information. Okay, we will go back through the graduation summary area by area. But you'll see that if you pull up an individual kid, you will see this return to search. This takes me back to my full list of kids. However, I had it filtered before. My next area is my credit requirements. So it is showing me how many credits are required or that the student has met out of my district's requirements. And you can see for my district, I have 20.5. So you might be at the 20 mark. You might, for your district, you might have additional credit requirements. Next is your graduation pathways. There is a bug in the system since they've updated with version 25.1 for the graduation tracking. This is still looking at points, so it will never get to the part where it says completed. It will only be in progress. So they have a bug fix for that, so they're aware of it, but just be aware you will have to look individually at the student's pathways because this in progress might not be correct. That student might have it completed. The next is the exemptions. So if you're looking, it will show you how many exemptions the student has. So again, if we look at Corey here, if I click on his exemptions, he has 11 different exemptions. It will take me to the student exemption screen where it will provide each of the areas. And then you will also see some of the areas in your student exemption and requirements screen are expanded and some of them are closed. If they're expanded, that means data has been entered into that area. If it is closed, that means no data has been entered into that area. Okay, so that is why some are open and some are closed when you are viewing a student. And then again, you can return to the search and that's going to take you back to the search criteria or the filtered criteria that you selected. Okay, next is looking at updating our graduation summary. So if we pull a student in context, so I'm going to look here and we're going to work with the dwarf family today. We are going to look here at Sneezy first off. So if we are looking at this, so when you need to refresh your data, and I'm going to go back a level, sorry, I'm going to go back to my graduation tracking, and then I am going to go into the individual summary for Sneezy Dwarf. So when I'm looking at the summary here, this basically is your update button. So anything that you do in the system throughout student information, whether it's on the student exemption screen, you're adding assessments, anything like that, that is a requirement for graduation. You do have to check this, and this is per individual student. So if you're working with a student, maybe, they submitted, assessment scores, you updated that, you need to check for updates. Now, if you look here at my last updated, it says last updated at 11:11 at 4:31 p.m. So that was yesterday at 4:30 by the Dazzle DBA. So that is the Dazzle Student Information Database. Okay, so this is the automatic run that it does every day, that it looks and recalculates and finds all that information and brings it in. But as you're working throughout the day, you also want this screen to be updated. So if there are any changes that are made, you would click on check for updates. It will process. You can see that it's spinning. It will look at anything, update anything, and then now you can see that it was last updated by me at 9:21 a.m. Okay. And if anything was changed, it will provide that information. Okay. So again, always double check that. Again, it is individual. So, if you're working with the student, you'll have to make sure that you check that. So, a couple other things that you will want to look at to make sure that the graduation tracking is calculating properly is looking to make sure that the student's fiscal year begin date has been added to the student. So, if I look here at Sneezy, I'm going to go into his profile and I'm going to go to his FN attributes and make sure that he has a fiscal year begin date. If this is blank, it will not calculate in the graduation tracking. So that is a requirement. So again, and then I'm going to switch here. We are looking at the graduation requirements for 2023 and beyond. So Bashful here is my student that is 23 and beyond because financial literacy is now a requirement and it populates additional information in the graduation tracking. Another thing, and we already discussed this, is making sure that our courses is high school credit. So both all your courses as well as your course history. So if that is high school credit is not checked, it will not calculate on the graduation tracking screen. So next on page 5 is looking at the scheduled job. So again, we saw that for um, Sneezy that it ran last night at 4:30. So it did all the calculations for all of the students. There is a way to turn that off. It is not suggested to turn that off, but if you are working with something and you don't want things updated yet, you can turn it off in your district options. Not everybody has access to this, but if you do, under management, district administration, and then district options. In our district options, under the district, you have to be at the district level. That's why some people don't have this option. There is graduation point service. And with this being checked, it recalculates daily. And that is when you see that Dazzle DBA that it does the recalc. If you uncheck this, your graduation tracking screen will not update, and you would have to do each student manually by clicking on check for updates. So again, it is not suggested that you do this, but it is an option if you are working on something and need to turn it off so it doesn't update overnight. Okay, next, let's look at our graduation summary screen. Oops. So I'm going to start here with Bashful. So we're going to go to our graduation tracking menu and I'm going to go into my graduation summary. So again, depending on what your district requirements are, it is going to do the calculations here based on your district requirements, 20 being the minimum for the state minimum requirements. And again, all of it is broken down of what is required by the state. So having your 4 Englishes, 4 maths, etc. So looking at these, you are going to see up to 4 different, actually you can see 5 different areas, but typically there's 4. You are going to see your completed, which means that everything in that credit requirement area has been completed. So if we look at science, I'm going to click on that. You can see that he has taken his physical science, biology, chemistry for 3 credit hours. So, and then you can break it down. Here was physical science, what year it was taken, what credit was earned, life science, and then our advanced sciences. Okay. So again, once that is met, it will change to completed. In progress means that something is not complete yet. So you're working on it, but it's not there. So we're going to look at English. So if we look at English, we see that Bash has taken English 9, 10, and 11. He is currently a 12th grader and enrolled in English 12, but it has not yet been completed. If he completes it, it will complete the 4 earned credits, and then that will change the status to completed. So if they are enrolled, so they are scheduled to a course, that information will populate for the student in the yellow area. Anything that's been completed will show in green. The other thing that you might see is your exempt. So, for example, a lot of our students exempt physical education because they're in sports, maybe they're in marching band, show choir, things like that. So, if they are exempt and that was checked on the exemption screen, then if you come here, it will say that it has been exempt, which also means that it's been completed. So it gives the green check mark because it was exempt. And then you can see that it says no earnable credits. So they didn't take anything. They're just exempt from it because of their extracurricular activities.
Shelley, do you have a comment in the chat from
Oh,
Scott?
okay. It will not, correct, Scott. It will not actually show as completed. It will show as exempt if you mark it. So if the student has the waiver, the PE waiver, so for example, this student. So then what I would do is you physically have to come to the student exemptions. In the student exemptions, you will come exempted from the phys ed graduation requirements, and you will mark this as yes. Once that is marked as yes, then it will mark the exempt and give the green check mark on the student, the graduation tracking. Okay. But again, it doesn't automatically happen. This physically has to be marked in order for the exempt to show up in the graduation tracking. Okay, so back to the screen. So we're looking at this, there's a lot of information. The other thing that you might see is the EMIS Economics and Financial Literacy. Okay, this is important because this comes from the core subject area. So, so when this is marked as completed, this is what is reported to do. Okay, so how is this marked as completed? Again, that is back on that exemption screen. So if I go to my exemptions, I have the core economics and financial literacy. So if I mark this as yes, then on the graduation tracking, it will mark it as completed. So you'll notice this one says it's completed. Now, if you're looking at Bash here, he also has financial literacy. Anybody that has the fiscal year begin ninth grade prior to 2023 will not see this. Okay, so this will be blank. You will still have this, but you will not have this. This one is the one that is reported to do. This is the one that is looking for the grade that you've completed the course and say that it is completed. So it is kind of a two-step process here. Okay, so if we view this, um, they can take courses. So in this case, they've completed courses, but they marked it as completed on that screen so you can see that it's 0 earned credits. Okay. But now, so if we're looking at our financial literacy, if I look at this, he is actually scheduled in a financial literacy class that is scheduled, it is scheduled for second semester. So we're going to kind of tweak this a little bit to show how this works. So maybe this is a first semester class and the student is finishing. Okay, so it says upon completion, it will be marked, get the 0.5 or the half credit, and it will be marked as completed. So I'm going to go back to my student real quick, and I am going to go into my mark screen and enter a mark for this student. I don't know why I didn't have that. Here's my financial literacy. He has a B plus. Click on save. Okay, so it is showing that he's got a successful grade. So now if I go back to my student and my graduation tracking, if I look, notice it is still marked as incomplete or not started. Okay. So remember, anytime that anything is done with a student, we have to update it. So it's not been updated since 7 o'clock this morning. So now I have to say check for updates. It will process. And now you can see because that grade was in there, that course has been completed. It has now switched from not started to completed. And if we look, it changes from yellow to green that it's been completed. Okay. So other things that you might see in this area, here is your grad plan. We will talk about the grad plan in a little bit, but this is one area where you can access it. There's a couple other areas. We'll talk about that towards the end. But you'll see the drop down arrow here. This and the word more here are exactly the same. So if I click on this, it's just going to expand. If I click on it, it collapses. If I click on more, it will expand. So once you click on more, it shows you a little bit more details. It shows you how many credits are earned, how many are required. So it kind of goes through each. These are the state requirements. So it has that information in there for you, what is required by the state. Okay. Now, um, this is task 2 of the um, graduation verification handout, but there is something called core overflow. So this is how you want additional credits that a student might take and where you want them to go. Okay, so I am going to type in overflow in my go-to. So if, oh, let me go here to the high school level. That's why I'm having issues. I didn't switch back after I uh, looked at my district options. So if I am looking at my core overflow, you can see here, there are some that are that were pre-made in there, the 2013 and 14. They don't have all of they don't have all of the new core subject areas. So you can use the 2014 if you want, but if you create a current one, that is going to have all of the new core subject areas. So if we look at this, I just named it current so you guys can see it is showing, and a lot of these will come by default. So for example, electives, you have to have 5 per the state minimum. English, you have to have 4, etc. So fine arts, you do not have to have 4. Um, so looking at this, you can complete this how you want. So a good example is to look at our math. So, if you're looking at the math, so here is our advanced math. So one credit required. Well, what happens if a student takes 2 advanced math classes? What happens to that additional credit? So then once they've met the required value of 1, then the remaining advanced math classes are going to go to my math optional classes. So in the math optional classes, I'm required to have 3. So if I take 2 advanced math, 1 is going to go towards my optional math. Okay. And then if I take more than 3 here, it's going to go towards my electives. So this is kind of a setup of where it's going to go. And you can see a majority of them will go to electives. Some like physical education, you can only earn a half a credit. So it's not going to go towards an elective. And our electives, if we earn 5 electives, we can't put them anyplace else. They're just going to stay and accumulate in the elective area. Okay, so that is called the core overflow if you want to place them in different areas if the student has already met that criteria. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my student. And I lost him. So going back, looking at my graduation tracking summary. Okay, so we looked at these. We know how many credits are required. We know we have to update if we are adding things. If you're manually adding course history, you need to make sure you're updating. Grades are being added, etc. It does not automatically update on its own until that overnight, depending evening, overnight batch update. Remember our fine arts. Okay, so our fine arts is a little bit different than some of our other credits. So when we're looking at our fine arts, and this is on page 9, looking at our fine arts, you are required to have 2 semesters of fine arts, which would equal or could equal 1 credit hour. So half each semester. Um, it does not look at the number of credits. So it does not know to say, hey, you know, you've completed this, you've taken one this semester, one this semester. It doesn't know because you can see here, band is a 1 credit where math theory is half. So fine arts is another one where you have to manually update that student exemption screen. So again, looking at Bashful, it looks like that he hasn't completed his fine arts. So if I, view it, it was showing, hey, he's got 1.5 credits. He's met his requirements. He's taken the 2 different semesters. So I want to go and manually mark that on my exemption screen. So I'm going to go back to my exemption screen. I'm going to go to my fine arts requirement, and you can see so far it is marked as no. He has not met the requirements. So I'm going to change this from no to yes. Okay. Now, and this is, I don't know why it's so late in the system, but this is pages 27 and 28. When you are on this screen, if you make any changes to this screen, you do have to click the green update exemption button. Pretend that's your save. That's like a save button. So not only do I have to click it here to save that, yes, I've met the fine arts requirement. Now, when I go back to my grad summary screen, it is still not updated here until I click the check for updated information. So it's a 2-step process if you are doing something on your exemption screen. You have to save with that update, and then you have to come here and check for updates. And now you can see Bashful is completed with his fine arts. Yes, Scott, you can. There is some of these things, yes, you can mass update. Some of these things you can't. So most of the batch updates are down in this section. Most of the credit requirements are based on the students' courses and course history. Okay. So looking at page 10. So they do have the core subject area. We did talk about that overflow if you do want some of the extras to go into your electives or to other math. But there is a note there that if a student is taking advanced physical science credit using the SAP and then takes another physical science course, but that will meet the physical science requirement of SCP, Multiple courses might have to be created unless you do have that core overflow and it'll flow into that other elective, um, individually. So if you don't have that core overflow, you might have to have multiple courses created for the same class, but so they apply to different core subject areas. So again, please make note of that note if you're wondering why things are happening a certain way. So with that being said, um, I know most of you don't look at the EMIS manual, but in the EMIS manual, um, and it is also on page 11 of the graduation tracking guide, these are all the different core subject areas for credit. So if you're wondering what SEA meant or SAP, that is where these are coming from. Okay, so and these were just updated recently. So these and the document has all of the new ones. So again, our MTA is our advanced math or our algebra 2, where our MTO is all of our other math except for algebra 2. Yes, you can adjust your core overflow. So for example, if your maybe your MTA was then going to just regular electives instead of which is on the screen, but it was going towards your regular electives instead of your MTO. You can adjust that and save that, and it should go towards that. And then again, with the update overnight, since it's going to affect multiple students, it should update that grad summary overnight. Okay, next going back, just the last thing that I want to talk about um, are some of our electives. Okay, so again, we have to have those 5 electives. So, and we can see here Bash has met that. So I'm going to click on view to see what has been met. Okay, so, and you can see that 5 of those, or he has the 5 credits. So of that, he should also have the 1 credit of fine arts and the half credit of financial literacy. Okay. So again, with that being said, the exemption has to be manually marked because um, the student might have more than one or more than the 5 electives. So if I go back to my graduation tracking, my student exemption screen, thinking, okay, and then where's my where's my electives? Oh, elective requirements. Okay, so then if I check this, that is going to populate that my elective credits have been met. Again, if I make updates here, I have to update here, which it's already updated. And then because he already met the requirements, then I would also have to check for the updates here as well. Okay. Any questions with the credit requirements? Okay, we're going to move on to our graduation pathways. Um, that is for your records, so that is going to determine here. So, for example, if a student takes 2 MTAs, they only are required to have 1. Where is that other credit going to go? So if you want it to count towards the MTO, the math other than algebra 2, um, it's going to take off the credit count here. So that overflow works at the counts for this screen going towards the credit requirements. And then, of course, the credit requirements then, of course, go to EMIS. So our graduation pathways, okay? So our first area is our state assessment. Again, just like the credit requirements, there are three symbols that you'll see. You'll see your in progress, your completed, and then anything that has not been started or it has not been met yet. Okay, so those would be the three that you'll see in the permanent um, requirements area. So starting with our state assessments, who am I looking for? Okay, I'm going to pull up Dopey. Okay. So if you look here for state assessments, I can click on view and it's going to show me 2 out of my 6 have been completed. Okay. So now if I'm looking here, and these work hand in hand, is our state assessments to show also competency. So you can see for Dopey here, he only has the 2 required areas for competency. I didn't put in the other ones. But it shows that he has taken the end of course exam for Algebra 1 or math, and his score was a 680. And then for ELA 2, he got a 691. So it's showing that those are done. Now, if I go back to my summary screen, okay, it's showing that 2 out of the 6 have been taken. And then you can see here, it works along with my competency. So I can see that English 2 or ELA 2 is checked. It is done. But my Algebra 1 is not. So it's still showing that this is in progress. So if a student does not pass Algebra 1, they do have to be assessed a second time. So before they can do any additional options. So again, they're assessed twice in Algebra 1. If they do not make competency for Algebra 1, then they can go to additional options. So our student here, Dopey, has taken the Algebra 1 assessment, and of course assessment again. So we're going to go put that in individually for the student. So we're going to look at his end of course. Okay, we see that he took it last spring. Well, now he just took it this fall. I know you don't normally take it in the fall, but we're going to add it in. Now we'll keep it at the spring. So we're going to do it for this fiscal year. He's at the high school. Okay, he's currently 12th grade. Standard test, Algebra 1. Score is being reported. And this time he passed and he got a 686. And that is still at basic because until they get to 700 mark, it is basic and then it'll move up to proficient. Oops. So I'm going to hit create. It successfully created it. Go back to my student, my graduation tracking. And this is one area where you will see that as soon as that test goes in, um, oh, no, not there. Hold on. No, never mind. It's not this, it's something else. Sorry. There's one area where it will automatically update. That is your student memberships. But in my assessments, I still have to check for updates. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to update my competency area and show that that's been completed for this student. So now if I look at his assessments, it will show it will show each of my assessments when they took it, and you can see the highest of the 2 assessments. Okay, and that is the one that was used to show competency. These are all the 6 required areas. Okay, moving on. So if the student is working on an assessment, and this is on page 16. Please look at the note if the student did not assess and has a score not reported. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that screen so you can see what this looks like. So a student has a score not reported. So if it is any of those listed on page 16, the 2, the 5, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to J, and X, okay, it will not populate on the graduation tracking summary screen. So it does not count towards it. However, if it is marked as a Y with the score not reported, that it was student transferred in and the course was already completed, that will populate. Okay, so please make note of that if you are working with scores not reported. So, you might have a student. So we're going to go here. We're going to skip to our next student. We're going to look at Grumpy here. Go to his graduation tracking. And I'm just going to say, for example, okay, so for example, our student couldn't pass the end of course exams for ELA or algebra. So now they're going into the additional options. So there's a multiple ways that the students can that can show competency without passing the end of course exams. So they can demonstrate 2 career focused activities. So one being functional or foundational, sorry. And then we can enlist in military, CCP classes that has been completed, and college admission tests, so ACT, SAT, if those have been met with remedial scores, and we'll get through all of those in just a minute. So when we're looking at this, if the student has not met the end of course, the 684 for ELA 1 or ELA 2, but it shows competency because they transferred in or they show competency for something else. So for example, here for ELA 2. So I'm going to go to the student and I'm going to look at their membership codes. So they can show competency another way. So if it was brought in from another school. So for example, if the student came in from a non-public school or maybe, a charter school, parochial school, whatever it might be. So I'm going to add my membership. So their graduation pathways are 52, and then that this student met the ELA competency via a non-public school. Okay, and then whatever the start date is, I'm just going to put October 1st, and then I'm going to hit save. Once I hit save, okay, that should populate. If I go back to my students tracking, and their summary screen, you should see this is the one. As soon as that membership code is added, it automatically updates. So you can see that ELA automatically is now, the student is now competent in ELA based on that membership code. Okay. So looking on page 18, looking at our career focused activities, again, you have to complete 2 of them, one being in the foundational area. So we're kind of going to go through these. This kind of summarizes each of the foundational activities. Our OCTA is based on our web exams. So they must score proficient or higher on 3 or more of the web exams in a single career pathway. Our industrial credentials, they must earn at least 12 industrial credential points in at least one of the 13 different areas. Okay. This is a manual entry Okay, and it might fall into multiple categories. So because they met the requirements in one of the areas, it might actually be in multiple. And then the pre-apprenticeship must complete the pre-apprenticeship program in a student's chosen career field. Okay, and then this box also needs to be checked on the student exemption screen. And then the student has passed a state issued license, okay, in their industry credential area. Okay, so where do these get updated? So I'm going to switch students here. We're going to move on to Happy. Okay, so we're going to look at the industry credentials or all of these for this student. So you can see here that Happy has met his industry credential. So if I click on view, it is going to provide what area, so in informational technology. Again, sometimes it does classify into multiple categories. So you might see it listed twice, but once the 12 is earned, it is earned whether it's one area or multiple areas. It's not going to say, well, because it accommodates 2 areas, they get 24 earned. No, they still only get the 12. So going back to my student menu, if I go under my assessments, okay, they're basically listed here. So here is my OCTA. So if I have information and I'm putting that in, I can add my OCTA information. So that would be put in. Okay. So your test date, your testing area, what it might be. So you can see there's multiple areas. And then, of course, if you're putting this in manually, their score is going to be here, and then you would put the technical score. My industry credentials. So if I look at my industry credentials, you can see this is where he had met his industry credentials and got those 12 earned points. Okay, by passing. So, and again, here are all the different areas of assessments for my industry credentials. Okay, so again, there's multiples. You would pick what your student is involved in. And then the last one is your state issued license, which would be your industry assessment. Okay, so if they do pass that industry issued and get that state license, that would be put here. So I do have to put a test date. So one, and then you can see here are all my different ones. So if they, the nurse's assistant, cosmetology, so those are some of your popular ones where when they're graduating, they are actually taking that exam and they're getting their license. So this is where you would add that as well. Back to our summary screen for our students. Next is our supporting activities. So these, you have to have one of these, and then you also have to have a um, supporting activity. So work-based learning experience, this is totaling 250 hours with evidence of positive evaluations. So this information can be tracked in the student's grad plan. So I'm going to click on this so we can view this. So if I look at the student's grad plan, where's my, well, I don't have it entered here. So let's go back to I'm going to go back to my student exemption screen. This is anything that is on the grad plan gets entered through the student exemption screen. So I'm going to close this and open my grad plan. And then you can see here is my work-based learning. So if I want to add something, I can add what it was, okay, and then how many hours and what the date is. And then it'll keep track of that information. Again, it's not populating on the plan because there was nothing there. Okay, so that is your work-based learning showing 250 hours. Okay, I am going to show you a way to create a miscellaneous area for students that you can track points. You can do it here, which again populates on the grad plan, but there's other options as well, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Going back to our summary, looking at our workforce and readiness is our next area. So our workforce and readiness, those are our work keys. So again, that is under our assessments, but if I click on view, if I had anything in this area, it would populate what I had. So I'm going to go back to my student, go back to my assessment screen, and then I have my work keys. So once I have my work keys, I can add my date, and then anything that is after 2017, which is most of our students, oops, is going to be version 2. Anything prior to June of 2017 would be version 1. But then you can see you can apply the applied math and so forth, each of the areas looking for the score. And then the last one in that area is our Ohio Means Jobs. This is a simple one. There's not a whole lot of tracking to do with this one, except when we're looking at it, our option is that it is complete or not complete. And we are just going to, if they completed the requirements for Ohio Means Jobs, we would go to our exemption screen. And we would mark our Ohio Means Jobs. That will give them the seal as well as meeting that optional competency. Okay, and then since 2 of these have been met, you can see that I have the additional option has been completed. Okay, again, one having to be in the foundational area. Next is our military enlistment. Okay, this one's a little tricky because it's not where we normally go to add our information, but in order to enlist in the military, you are going to go to the grad plan details on the student exemption screen. And I know it's a lot of clicking back and forth, but so when I am here, okay, I don't necessarily need to mark anything here. What I need to do is go into my grad plan, and then you will see military enlistment. I can put that the document has been submitted, which is the DD Form 4, and the date that it was submitted. So we'll say November 7th. If the student has taken the ASVAB test, you can add the scores in if you wish. So then I'm going to update my exemption screen. Oh, I stop. Okay, let me update that. Okay, so that has been updated. Okay. If the student does, you can also check that the military seal has been earned. Okay. I'm not going to check that right now because I need some things for my import. So back to my summary. Okay, and then you can see the military is now completed. Okay, next is our complete college courses. Okay, these are students that are taking CCP courses, so in areas of Algebra 1 or ELA 2 to show competency if they have not passed. So if they did not pass, remember taking the assessment twice, then they can use their CCP classes to show competency. If you are going to show competency in with a CCP class, you also have to make sure that you are putting in the membership codes for this student. Oh, let me skip next dwarf. So if the student is taking competencies, so for CCP, you can see I've added the membership codes for the CCP English and or math. If I click on this, oh, I can't switch from here. I did that after. Let's add 52. And then you can see there is one that is for both math and English, and then you can do them individually as well. So that is an option. And then last is our ACT scores. So if my student has ACT scores, okay, so they've been entered into the system. Okay. An ACT score, if you look at page 20, their ACT or SAT, a lot of our districts do the statewide ACT um, testing for the junior year. If you are using the SAT, those requirements are also listed, but looking at our ACT, English needs to be greater than or equal to 18. Reading is greater than 22, and math has to be greater than 22. Okay. So if those are met, and I'm not sure why this isn't working because I did everything, it should check them off in your additional information. So you can see here, oh, it did. Okay. So it is marked that I have completed my ACT. So if I click on view, it is going to show what my score was and then the minimum requirements, as well as the SAT if you are using that for your assessment. Okay. Any questions with the permanent requirements? Okay. Next is on page 21 showing readiness. So if I look at my students, we'll just use this student. Okay. So a student must have 2 seals earned, one being a state seal. So there's multiple state seals, and then of course there's our local seals that are available. So as long as 2 are earned, more can be earned. Depending on the student, but a 2 is the minimum requirement. So if we are looking, you will see that if it is completed, it will be the green check mark. If it is not met, it is going to be the X. And then if I did not have the the 2 seals, this would be our yellow in progress. Our seals itself will not show yellow, it would be our completed. How do we do these? These are just on our student exemption screen. Okay, so there is a little trick to these. Okay, so you will see that these first 3 here are economics and financial literacy, our fine arts, and our physical education. These are grayed out. Well, these aren't the seals. I guess I didn't mention that earlier. These are grayed out because these come from our requirements here. If I scroll down to the bottom, these are our state seals. So you'll notice my College Ready seal is grayed out. That is because it is coming from that graduation summary that I have met the ACT requirements of a non-remedial score. So because of that, it will automatically check this. Okay. So, honors diploma, if I am selecting an honors diploma, this is going to go based on um, the courses that the student has taken. Um, and then you can see once honors diploma is selected, this will get grayed out because once those courses are completed and they are honors classes, then it will check this box automatically. So those two are based on criteria that is entered into the system. Everything else is a manual entry by checking the box. Okay, and I did not write this document, but pages 23 and 24 are the industry credentials and the workforce readiness information with the work keys. 23 does have an example of where one of the industry credentials falls into two different areas. So you can see that it fell into those two areas, but they only earned the 12 required credits or points, I should say. Okay. So moving on to page 25. So let me move back to happy here. So you are not going to see this for all of your students, but if a student does need to take an alternate assessment, so there is the option for the alternate um, uh, requirements. So this will not populate until that assessment result is actually entered into the information or into the assessment screen. So you can see with Happy, I have my permanent requirements, which it defaults to. That's what we just went over. If an alternate assessment was entered into the system for the student, you will get this tab for alternate requirements. So then you can see here, it will show what the assessments were and you can view that. So if you look at that, you can see that they took the high school alternate assessment for math, but they have to meet the 4 other areas. So where is this? Again, this is in our assessment screen. Alternate assessment. I was looking under A's. And then you can see here is his math. So if we look at it, as long as they are passing, that will populate on that screen. And this is what generates the tab. Once one of these has been entered, it will generate that tab for the alternate assessment requirements. Okay. So we talked a lot about our exemptions. So there's a lot on the screen. You have your EMIS exemptions, you have your seals and things like that. So on page 26, it does talk about an import. So there is an import that you can import graduation exemptions. Now, not all of them are on this spreadsheet. But if you're working with seals, instead of coming to each student and going, okay, this student got, Ohio means jobs, and then go to the next student, and that student did, you can create a spreadsheet, and then you can mark them on the spreadsheet because you can filter and so forth, and then you can populate it that way. So I created my spreadsheet from, I did a easy query student search in order just to get some students. So it does have to be in this order, and I'll show you where to get the template, but it has to have the student ID first, the student's last name, and then the student's first name. And then we'll go through some of these so you can see what they are. Where do I get this from? So that is in the that is in the Learning Center. So if I go to Student Information in the Learning Center, under Quick References, in Quick References under my templates, I have my Graduation Exemption Import template. Okay, so that gives you the CSV file, and then you can add the students' names to it, the ID, last name, first name. Information about importing. The graduation exemption import, it's just going through the import export and pulling in that CSV file. But this has everything, how you mark it. So my electives, capstone, college credit plus, those are all yes, nos. And then all of my seals, okay, are going to be P for planned, E for earned, R to remove, and blank is nothing. It's not going to do anything. Okay, so P, E, or R, planned, earned, or removed. Okay, so if I look at this, okay, so, we can go through, I have some information in here, if they're doing a graduation pathway, if they have advanced math, sciences, etc., if they've met their electives. Okay, so we're going to work here with Sleepy. Okay, so Sleepy doesn't have much. So let's look at Sleepy before we import this. Okay, so looking at this, he's got a couple of his exemptions here. And then he's got his citizenship and community service seal. Okay, but all the other ones are open. If we go back to his summary screen, okay, so I can look at my seals here and show what is earned here as well. So if I want to pull this in, okay, so again, maybe you've met the electives and so forth. So I want to pull this in. We're going to give Sleepy here a bunch of stuff. So he's met his electives. Remember, that's a yes. Okay. And then we're going to start looking at, these are all of our seals. So remember, if it was planned, it is going to be a P. So, well, he already had that one. We'll do fine arts. He plans to get his fine arts. And then all of the other ones are earned. And notice I'm skipping over the honors because that is going to be based on, easy. He is going to take courses. And then his technology seals also planned. So you can see I added some stuff here for him. I'm going to save this. Okay. So again, we're just kind of looking at some of these things here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is go into my management, import, export, and I have my graduation exemption import. So then I'm going to find my file and I'm going to say upload. So it's been successfully imported. So close out of here, go back to my students. So we're still looking at Sleepy, looking at his summary screen. Okay, so you can see here, he's got several. Well, I'll come back because remember, we always have to update. So if I go back to his exemptions, okay, so remember I said he met his electives, okay, had college credit plus, and then what he planned and what he has earned. Okay. I'm going to update this, and it is not in my summary screen until I click on the check for updates. So you can see here, so my electives is still in progress. and then everything else is still Xed. So I'm going to check for updates. Give it a second. And then now you can see everything that is earned. And then if it's planned, it is going to be in progress. Okay. So that is the import. Again, it does not import everything, but it does import a chunk of things. Okay. 27 and 28, we've already talked about how to update and check for updates. Now we're going to look on 29 at our graduation plan. And I'm going to look here at Doc. So when we're looking at our grad plan, so he's got everything. This is my example of everything that's been complete. So I can come here and I can view in PDF what the grad plan looks like. So it's going to download that PDF. Okay, so you can see it's going to show all the credits that they earned. Okay, so if freshman year they got, one elective, they met all their core requirements, and then you can see as it goes on. Any assessments that have been taken, the dates that has been taken, etc. So all of this information is populated from the information that's put into student information. Now, this information, goals and so forth, that is what you would put in for the student itself. Whether you want to do this with the student, maybe you don't, but you can then update this every time. So grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. So this is also going to show information from that summary screen. So if they've met competency in Algebra and English 2, it's going to mark it in green so you can see that that area has been met. If they have industry credentials, that information is going to populate when it's completed. The OCTA scores and all of that information that you are putting in the assessment areas or our alternative competency areas is going to populate here on the grad plan. We're not entering it separately. Okay. And then you can see, any CCP classes, etc. My seals, any seals that have been earned, those will populate here as well. And then as well as the FAFSA, and I believe there is a date, it's when you're entering it, there's a date that you can enter when the FAFSA form was completed by the student. So that's one way to view it. I'm going to go real quick. I'm going to look at data map. Some districts are using data map. You put a lot of assessments in there. So assessment data is in there. Multiple measure data is in there. But here we have our grad summary as well. So just like, student information, it changed from grad points to grad summary. So if I look for any of my students, so if I want to look for dwarf, oh, I probably have to go back. I might not be. Oh, now my fault. My error. I can't be a teacher. Oh, and this is last year. Let's try this again. No, I'm not sure. But next to the student's name, oh, why does it keep populating me as the teacher? There we go. There we go. So you can see here, this is going to also take me to my grad plan, but this is also a summary of what you see in student information. So it's going to show the overall, it's going to show each of their credit requirements. It will show state assessment scores for ELA, for math, and then all of the other areas. Are going to be listed, and then your college assessments are going to be listed and if they've met the requirements. And then if they have show competency in algebra or ELA, and if they didn't, if they met any of the additional options to meet competency. So again, it's a nice little synopsis of everything, so you can kind of see it. You can export this, so it's exportable where you can filter and so forth in Excel. So it's a great resource to have. And again, it allows you to go to that graduation plan, not to edit. You can only edit from the student's exemption screen. So looking at this is every time that you've updated it. So if you want to put that basic information in there, here is your FAFSA application date. So when you applied for the FAFSA, okay, and then your goals and so forth. So apprenticeship information, of course, has to be entered because that's not anywhere in student information. So you would put that information in there. So it is informational, so it is not a required field. And then you can also put in work-based learning information. So this is informational. It tracks the hours here. It shows you those hours. You would have to calculate them. It does not report anywhere. There is a way that you can create a miscellaneous element for your students for tracking purposes. This is is it task number 3? It is task number 3 in the grad verification document. So we're going to look at that because that could help with our work-based learning. So I am going to go into my, um, let's go to management and graduation eligibility. So school administration, graduation eligibility. And then this is where our overflow was. We also have our miscellaneous. So this is where you can add miscellaneous items for the students. Okay. So then when I'm here, I can create something new or I can modify. So if I'm just going to modify one, so maybe for volunteer hours, maybe your district requires every student to have 10 hours of volunteer time. So you can come in here, you can create it, create the code, name it, what they have to do. You only have 2 types of data. It can be numeric or it could be a true or false. So for example, did they meet with the counselor for an exit meeting? Yes or no, true, false. Okay, so that's used in that case. But volunteer hours, you might want to track that information. So it's going to be hours and you're going to enter that information there. So where do I find this for my students? So I still have my student in context under student. Instead of going to graduation tracking, I would go to graduation eligibility and then my miscellaneous values. So now here, okay, I met with the counselor and I have 20 hours of volunteer time. Okay, so again, it's just something that you can have that sticks with the student. Okay, but you also do have that work-based learning or the work-based hours in your grad plan. So let's go back to our grad plan. Okay, so we looked at some things such as our military. This is where you are going to check, and this is what checks it on the summary screen. Um, And then that is going to populate that document. Okay, so these are all the manual entries, everything else. So if I'm looking at the grad plan, everything else that is populated comes from student information, the information that's already entered. Okay. So even if you don't use this grad plan, it is partially populated for you because, the competency, the test results, all of that information is automatically going to be in there if you click on that create the PDF. If we simply check the box that someone earned the IRC, should we still have to enter the Rachel, I am not sure of that. I would think if you want it to show which area or which one that you would have to do it on the assessment screen in the Okta, but I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that for you. Okay, some other things as you're entering your EMIS graduation elements, we looked at a lot of these. If you have a student that is a non-attending graduate, this does have to be completed on the FN graduate tab in the student's profile. You cannot check that here. It is grayed out. So most of the things on the FN tabs are grayed out and you have to do them here except for the non-attending graduate, you do have to do on that FN tab. Okay. So again, a lot of these are what is determining if these exemptions have been met. So for example, um, my physical education for this particular student who are we looking at here, Doc. Okay, well, he met it a different way, but if he was exempt, I can switch that and it would automatically check down here. Okay. If a student is multilingual and is proficient in a foreign language, so there's multiple things that you have to do. It's a kind of a three-step process. You are going to add the language here. I know this doesn't look like a drop-down box, but it is. So all your languages are listed. You would include that language here. You would be able to include the seal of biliteracy. So that's 2. And then you would have to go into the student and go into their memberships and make sure that they have a language. For the seal of biliteracy, you would pick what language. And I forget what I did, Japanese. And well, I'll just do Spanish. I know that one was for sure. Then the start date, whenever that was, and save. Okay. So then those 3 things have to be done for the seal of biliteracy. Okay. If you do not do a membership code, it will not be reported to due. Going back, this section here, the optional graduation, oops, I keep going to here. I went here. My grad requirements. Now see, because I've updated information here, notice that this drop down, it opens every time, so I do have to close it. But again, if you're putting information in, it's automatically going to populate open. The optional graduation requirements here, these are going to be removed. So you'll see these because these are on the summary screen and you enter that information in other places, like the industry credentials are, in the assessment area and so forth. And of course, this is gone. Okay. So our optional career tech, so our Okta and so forth, those are listed here. And then our seals, which we've already talked about. Okay. And then pages 39 and 40 is talking about creating the graduation plan, which we've looked at in multiple places. So we can get it from our graduation summary screen. We can get it from Data Map. And then there is also in the Analytic Hub, there is also a report that you can run the grad plan, but you do have to have the student ID. So last but not least is looking at JVS data. So we have multiple students that are, they're homeschool, but they're at the JVS. So we want to see what they've accomplished at the JVS. So I'm going to switch students. So Tommy is attending the JVS. We want to see how he is doing. So I'm going to go to my graduation tracking, my grad summary screen. Okay. So as long as your district trust is set up, you are able to view both what you have at the homeschool as well as what you have at the JVS. Okay. And I did have this set up. Where did my, uh-oh, where did it disappear to? So we're going to look to make sure that my district trust is set up, which it could have disappeared. Oh, you know what? I know I have to do last year because he was set up then. Yep, there he is. Okay, so if we're looking now, we have our graduation summary for our homeschool as well as our JVS. Okay, how do we know if a district trust is set up for your district? Again, you might not have access to this, but it is district administration, and then we have a district trust. And then in here, at the district level, you will see all of the different districts that I have a trust with, one being the Wayne County JVS. So, and then I am able to see grad points. It's a two-way street. The Wayne County JVS also has to set up a district trust with the TCCSA test district and allow me to see grad points. Okay, these are the four things that you are able to see with the grad point, or I'm sorry, with the district trust. Easy query information, grad points, data map information, and HB 410 attendance data. So because I have that district trust set up, let me switch back to the high school level and I need Tommy. So now I can see my homeschool information. So everything that's been completed or in progress. And I can also see what has been in progress at the Career Center at the JVS. So if I look at social studies, I can click on view and I can see, what he has completed or what he has taken at the JVS. Okay. So I can go through and, see anything. So unfortunately, there is no way to merge the two. So what is listed here, it doesn't automatically merge with the homeschool until it is imported into the course history. Once it's brought into the course history, then that will update the course requirements. But in the process during the school year, you can see what is in progress, what they have scheduled, etc. Okay. So again, the district trust has to be set up at both the homeschool and at the JVS, and then the student's SSID must be the same in both buildings. If the SSID does not match, that's a big problem for multiple things, but it also will not provide that district trust and provide this information. Okay. If you are working on this and you are doing something in Tommy's, maybe with his assessments, maybe with his course history, it will not automatically update the screen until you do check for updates, and it will only update the homeschool. It will never update the JVS and vice versa. The JVS, it will only update for the JVS. It will not update and provide you with updated homeschool information. Okay, so this button is for individual use for the district in context, but that nightly batch job will run and update all the students in all the districts. With that being said, are there any questions?